Welcome to this special bonus episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Zach Semke, Director of Passive House Accelerator, and we're pleased to be sharing a series of bonus episodes recorded at PhiusCon 2022 in Chicago. These interviews were made possible by generous support from Corp and Zola Windows. In this interview, Passive House podcast co-host Matthew Cutler-Welsh speaks with Sanchez of RDH Building Science. Enjoy.
Thank you for your time, Maureen. Thanks for being here. How are you enjoying the conference?
It's been great. So first, Matthew, thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
And the conference, we're barely done with day one.
Yeah.
And I have to say, very inspiring.
Yeah.
It's always the case, I'm sure, but the keynote speakers, seeing clients step up.
Some of your clients, yeah?
Some of the keynote speakers.
Right.
Chris let me just check the name, but Trinity Financial.
Yeah.
I was very impressed because seeing clients that just step up and follow you into that learning curve to then talk about the Passive House standard, not just from a technical standpoint, but also, benefits and the whole value of delivering these high performance buildings, as well as bringing a lot of health.
Yep.
Health concerns and better quality environments for the occupants. I just thought it was really inspiring because we don't have these clients all the time. We have some of them, but just to be reminded that some of them are out there.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that because there's been some really good topics about the economics and then broadening that out to the wider economic benefits to the community.
Yeah.
And it's a tough one because it totally makes sense, but I also know that those sort of wider health benefits are seen as externalities by a developer, and it's very hard to bring that in because they're not part of the projects. Everyone benefits, but it's hard to make an economic case as the developer or the project owner for those wider benefits as part of the bottom line and cost benefit.
And I would rephrase because I think they're totally part of the project. Because you're entering but providing the right environment for your occupants, which is more or less the end goal.
Yeah.
But I would phrase it as we don't know yet how to bring it into the financial picture.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that because that was literally the talking of my talk today, which was seeing the bigger, like the whole picture, the bigger landscape of deep energy retrofits, which is all about zooming out of your, ROI, return on investment, payback, to really start framing the conversation differently.
Yeah.
And so, back to the keynote speakers, seeing these themes pop up here and there for me has been really, really inspiring.
So how do we do that? Because deep retrofit is hard and it's expensive. At the end of the day, everyone's going to benefit.
Correct.
But who's going to pay for it?
Okay, so that's an answer I don't have. That's a question I don't have an answer for. But it's still exactly the comments that I've pushed through this presentation, because we know that it's 100% needed from a climate standpoint.
Yep.
It's also needed from an occupant standpoint. Like, we need resilient spaces, we need healthy spaces, right? Like, if we're trying to work on social justice as well as environmental justice, like, we need to do all these deep retrofits, right?
Yeah.
It's going to help the economy as well. And the truth is, we're not yet seeing the whole picture. By me trying to do that presentation, the goal was to widen, right, the perspective, to include resiliency, to include future carbon taxes, to include the weight that we're putting on national medical sector with all the sickness and all of that. Even insurances, right? The cost of how to say that, the cost of paying back for all these climate disasters and all that. So you're trying to really zoom back. And I think that the business case for deep retrofit is almost self-evident, once you start seeing the whole picture. Yeah. If you also start thinking about devaluation of your asset when you don't take care of it and others will do, then what type of rent or resale value will you get? How much tenant retention will you get? What are the penalties that you're facing if during an extreme event you have to rehouse people? That's not for everybody. That's around like shelter buildings, but a lot of the buildings we work on are actually shelter buildings during extreme events, right? Yeah. So I already know that the perspective, when you look at the whole picture, you bring every single perspective to the table. I do think that we have a solid case that we don't yet know how to all add up in a dollar sign. But for us to get there, I honestly think that we need everybody around the table. And I don't mean just design practitioners and client groups, but I also mean, the insurance world, right? Yeah. We're talking about the medical sector. Yeah. We're talking about financing. Because
it's those people that are going to pay for rehousing if something goes wrong.
Correct.
Not the building owner.
And they're able to guide us more. For example, in terms of insurance, if the insurance world, and by the way, they're really fast at catching up, right? Like when something happens, the next day they're ready to go.
Yeah, their equation changes.
And so they have with every single climate event, right?
Yeah,
we don't talk about
the rates go up.
Correct. And so we've heard through, the feedback that the insurance world is ramping up really fast to including all of that, flood risk and passive survivability. Yeah. And so I think, in all honesty, I don't think that there is one of us that has the answer to cracking that deep retrofit now, right? But I think that with the brains that we know we have, with the quality of people and the intent and the passion and the will to have that impact, right? And to guide the world towards like good climate action and do what it takes. Yep. I actually think we can figure it out, but it will take the whole village.
But it sounds like figuring that out is not a technical problem. And last time you talked with Zach about the idea of early integrative design and thinking about everything early on. Yeah. It's almost what you're saying now is you need to expand that out beyond your design team and not just have the architect, the engineer and the owner in the room, but also have, who's funding this, who's going to be looking after this building, who's going to be looking after the people that are going to be living in that building and what's going to be the impact of them. That isn't typically done. I don't know of any examples where that is done, but that's an interesting thought experiment to say, what would that look like if we had people from the insurance companies, people from the health, medical, whoever's going to be looking after these people, educators, whoever is going to be involved in these people's lives in the next however many years, these people are going to be in that building. Yep.
And I think you're right. And I think that back to your point about technology and experience, like it's not that is holding us back.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, retrofit. Retrofitting buildings is a lot harder than new build. We get that, but we do have the experience. We've been, again, doing it for almost 30 years in Europe. It's hard, but it's not undoable, and it's definitely not technology.
Is RDH getting into some of that now, and doing deep retrofits?
Sorry.
Is RDH getting into some deep retrofit work?
Yeah, definitely, and. I think the funny part of it is rather than, trying one here and trying one there and having a few projects, we've been talking a lot to our not developer but portfolio manager clients. Yep. And again, that has this is very difficult because as much as they understand the climate emergency, the future regulations that are coming with carbon tax and the road to net zero, the need to provide a more resilient environments and better indoor air quality and environment. It all goes back to the financial question that you were asking: who will pay for that? And the truth is, that's why I'm saying I don't have all the answers, and I really want everybody at the table to help us solve this, because even on some great cases with great clients that are willing to understand and step up, the end product was like, okay, I hear you. I need to do all that. And maybe I don't have enough incentives. So I'm just increasing my rent as far as I need to get there. Yeah. And this is where, for me, it was also really hard to hear, because if you see everything that has happened, I think over the last 5 years, I think people have become a lot more aware of the fact that, you know, the climate crisis and climate justice is also tied to social justice and gender equality. Like everything is actually all, you know, connected to each other. And for us to have the right impact from a climate standpoint, which would actually widen inequality, is something that, you know, it's not the goal. It's not where we're coming from. And so we're going to have to solve that, because we have to work on, you know, reducing the gap, social equality, social justice, environmental justice. And so it's a tough triangle to be in. You know?
Especially when you're trying to justify your professional time and you've got deadlines to meet and you've got a specific job to do, and that's not in your job description or even in your project scope. Yeah,
it's almost like unintended consequences, right? But the same way that, I don't know, even if it's not in our scope, I think we need to be educated enough and comfortable enough to have these discussions. Like for me, a big theme over the last few years has been to, even if I don't have the answers, I will still raise the tough questions, because we know of them. We cannot hide from them. And truth be told, even with, you know, some of our toughest crowds, these questions have always been well received. You know, it might take a while to digest, but I've never, you know, been told off or dismissed for bringing some of these questions, because I think it is in a way forward thinking, and it shows to the client that you are trying to put yourself into their shoes. And that they will have to take decisions on some of these questions, and that you are truly there to support them into, you know, whatever is the extent of your scope. But no matter what your scope is, I do think we need to be versed in more than just our scope, right? We don't need to be experts in other scopes. We will have other disciplines, but we need to have that same vocabulary. You know, the way we were asking for, let's talk about that energy budget management, and I need all of my disciplines to be able to talk with me really well. You know, looking back in the mirror, I have to do the same thing, right? And it's not just technical, it's also like, you know, urban environments and density and, you know, transport and sustainable cities, because buildings are not, you know, single entities that just live somewhere, you know? So it's that growth and that awareness, and, you know. And
that description of an approach sounds like it would be a good idea for a designer, an overall designer, like an architect or even an urban planner. You're none of those. You're an engineer, which is very easy to sort of pigeonhole into a very specific, you know, person to be called upon when a particular problem needs to be solved. So, how do you, in your role, how do you expand your role? How do you lead that conversation when your job is just to fix a technical problem?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Matthew, because it took me a while to understand all the facets of my job, right? Because first and foremost, you're right, I am an engineer and my expertise is on technical subjects, right? It's energy modeling, it's, you know, being a passive house designer. That is what is at the core. But if I only have that, it is not enough to get successful delivery of these buildings, right? And it took, you know, I've been doing project for almost 15 years now. And it took until like, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago, when at a conference, I was asked by somebody outside of the business, what does it take to actually get these buildings across the finish line? And this is where I became aware of the additional layer of soft skills that you need to bring to the table to actually make it all work. And I've been called the glue, as a passive house consultant, you are the glue in the design team. And it's, in a certain sense, it is true, because you have to embed yourself into every single discipline. You are not, and you will never be over these disciplines. You are not the leading architects, but you are really making a flat hierarchy where everybody needs to be aware of everything. And you're kind of the central part, making sure that everybody is communicating.
Yeah.
Because when you start reducing these energy and carbon targets to such stringent levels, which we need to, for having, even a fighting chance to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees.
Yeah.
You gotta enable that communication. You have to be a really good communicator.
Yep.
You have to be able to take almost every single person in your design and construction team outside of their comfort zone in the smoothest and most delicate way ever, to show them that it's okay, we know how to do this. Here's the landscape, and if you follow the path, you'll get to the finish line, okay. And that is way beyond just technical skills.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't get taught that at engineering school.
So honestly, I'm telling you, I have 2 master's degrees, and sometimes I'm just thinking I should not have done all of this, and I should just have done master in psychology and people, and human behavior,
Counseling.
because that would have helped me so much. But it's, if we are to drive market transformation and significant acceleration of the delivery of high performance buildings, you have to remove every single barrier in front of you.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe that the biggest barrier we have on every single type of project is more linked to humans than to technology and buildings themselves. It doesn't mean that technology and buildings are like easy to fix or easy to design as, net zero and passive house, but the shift in the mindset, in the mentality, in the way we work together, in the way we judge and distribute our energy and carbon budget the same way we do with our financial budget, that's at the core.
Yeah.
And if we fix that, I actually think we can win.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's not technology. It's not a technical issue.
It sounds like you know your way around a spreadsheet, but your superpower is more challenging people in a empathetic way.
Yes.
And understanding where they're coming from, but not being scared to push and ask tough questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you, it took a while to get there, but
I'm sure.
I think actually that's a very good way to describe my superpower. I like it. I might keep that, because
it's yours.
It is what it is at the end of the day. Like, that's how we do that mass scaling, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we're just good technically, it doesn't help. We have to convince owners that that's the right way to do it. We have to put ourselves into their shoes. We have to speak their language. So again, no matter which engineer you might be, or even the architect, you have to understand their financial model, their motivation, their constraints regarding, maintenance and, capital cost planning and all of that, because it's a team sport. I've always said it, but the more I'm progressing my career, the more I'm like, oh my God, I thought that, I knew enough to have that wider picture. And there's always a wider one, which helps me, move forward.
But a good team needs a captain, and it's not always necessarily the lead architect.
Correct. Yeah. And you know what?
Or the goal scorer.
Yeah, I think it's just about leadership, and you don't need the title to lead.
Yeah.
And I think that's really that. And when you have that, leadership, that leading energy, that drive and that passion, because it is not just, I need to go there just because I need to go there.
Yeah.
You need to go there because of A, B, and C. And if you share A, B, and C with the rest of the team, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And they stop asking, why are we going there? They're more asking, how do we get there, right? And so I think when you work that way, I do believe that other people kind of feed on that energy. Because to tell you the truth, as much as, I'm a young female professional in a construction industry, it hasn't always been easy, but I still think that I've also had the opportunity to work with great teams that have been very welcoming of maybe the additional soft skills and superpowers that I've brought, and have fed onto that to have a very different experience. So,
how did you get to where you are?
In what sense?
So you grew up in France
Correct.
and then trained, you went to Oxford?
Yes,
Eventually.
so my first master's was in generalist engineering because I did not know what I wanted to do. And then I found my super
But
triangle.
most people that don't know what they want to do an arts degree or a science degree at best.
True. And the way French engineering schools work is that you get a national exam and you get ranked nationally. And if you rank really in the top, they allow you to go into like more prestigious, but more importantly, more generalist engineering schools where you get to do a bit of everything before you have to pick, which was awesome, right?
Yeah.
So I worked really hard to go there because I really didn't know. And then through that experience and touching a little bit of everything, I discovered that I was terrible at coding. Machine work was very fun. Fluid dynamics, I got okay. But I found my triangle between environmental sciences, sustainability, architecture, where I really wanted to go to actually. But I had done so much with engineering, and I think the problem solving of engineering is also what got me here today, because I didn't want to give that up. I didn't want to retrain as an architect. I wanted that engineering part of problem solving, which then guided me to a second master's in sustainable building. So I was already focused. And then the funny story is that I did my second master's. Amazing. Had a great time.
That was in France?
That was in Oxford.
That was one.
And then
Oxford,
I started working. And
did you know that building science existed? Was that a thing for you?
No, I kind of fell into it for that sustainable building course, where we touched a little bit on everything with architectural design, energy modeling, building science. So it was, and I think it was like still early days, right, for these masters to be created. I think right now the curriculum I'm seeing at universities is like it's a lot more defined. You can see the streams. I think for me it was a bit early days there, but I'm super grateful because we had a couple of lectures from a wonderful person, Bill Borges from the UK. I don't know if you know him, but you got to research him. Like he's been shouting at us to do the right thing since before I was born. And he was the guy that lectured me on that. And it was like mic drop. And so when I had these few lectures towards the end of the master's and started working, it became really obvious to me that we had that huge performance gap. And so in the UK, based on the data that we had, right, back at the time, on average, even new buildings, right, on average, buildings would use 2.5 to 3 times more the amount of energy we had predicted. And for me, that's when my brain exploded. I was like, something's not right. Yeah, exactly. I was like, I just finished a master's. I had a blank piece of paper and everything was perfect. And now you're throwing me into the real world and nothing is working. And it's not rocket science. This is, building physics. It hasn't changed for a long time. And it's kind of, not quite just about heat loss, but it's literally a matter of, heat transfer. I think we can figure it out.
So why are we getting it so wrong?
Correct. And that's where starting to search frantically around for that solution, and that's where I discovered Passive House. And so I'm not, what you would call a Passive House extremist, but the framework has been so useful to me because it's first started as one of the tools to close that performance gap, which then quickly turned into climate action. Right? And it's the same, of course, with the complexity of projects that we get through the door, it's more new build at the moment. But I've also cut my teeth 15 years ago on deep retrofit, smaller scale, but still deep retrofit. And I know that the retrofit framework also works really well. It's also another robust framework to deliver, proper climate action. You can work with it, you can tweak it as you see fit depending on what are the client needs and what are the project needs. But these frameworks have been such reliable tools and allies to know that we can make a difference.
You touched on the situation of being a young female in a relatively male-dominated world.
Yes.
How's it been?
It hasn't been all, butterflies and rainbows. No, but again, it is a bit tough to make your enough space for you to start with.
Yeah.
Right. I think as a young professional in a field that is not yet recognized. Right. And I mean, 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like energy efficiency, they're like, what?
Yeah.
Sorry. It's really
so
like
the whole building science area is new. It's not just you being a small part in a big industry.
Exactly. So again, I love the fact that my days are typically very varied, right?
Yeah.
I do energy modeling, but I also do a lot of client facing. I do a lot of training and education, but more importantly, I spend a lot of time on site too, because I love it.
Right.
And part of my values, like part of what I need to operate as a human, is to see these designs come to life. The best design in the world is great, but it doesn't help the planet, right?
Yeah.
And I need to see these designs go through. And so, I've had my fair share in the UK, where I first practiced, to go on site and go against like huge, older builders that are like, okay, you're cute, you're really nice, but by the way, I know what I'm doing because that's how we've been doing it for 30 years and that's how it is.
Yeah.
And I got my voice based on the technical knowledge that I've acquired, which is when you start stepping in and say, well, okay, you've done it like this for 30 years, but it doesn't mean you've done
How's
it
that
right.
working out for you?
Yeah, exactly. Right? But it does come like that confidence when no space is being made for you because you are not supposed to be, at the table.
Yeah.
You do rely on confidence and your own technical abilities to start building that up.
Yeah.
And so, like anybody else, this is what I've done. But I was talking, we were just talking about it with Dylan after his presentation this morning. The Passive House community is extremely welcoming. I don't think we have a lot of these communities around the world. And I do have a lot of people to thank for making a space for a younger version of myself to be able to express myself and show my technical expertise, and for me to be judged on my technical abilities only, not on my size, not on my age, not on my gender. Right? And so we still have progress to do on that front. I'm not going to lie. I think that, gender equality on the design portion, it's getting better, but again, even some of my most demanding projects, which weren't more staff at the table from every single discipline, I am very often the only female professional at the table, which to me is still a little bit shocking. And on the construction side, clearly we also have more progress to do. But back to your superpowers, I think that women bring different skills, right? A different touch than what men would. And so I have been, using my own way to approaching all these challenges, all these situations. So yes, technical expertise, but also my, the skills and the personality that I have as a woman. And it leads sometimes to a very different experience because even if it can be hard sometimes, one of the most rewarding moment I can recall was back in the UK. So I think that was probably 2017, 2018. It was the largest Passive House project at the time. And I was hired not as a Passive House consultant, but as a Passive House site support under the contractor. So a very different role, which again is first new. And second, not normally delivered by a woman.
No.
Right?
So that sounds like it's the on-ground implementation of the Passive House.
But with a GC that hadn't done it before and needed just a bit of extra support for confidence, right? To say, it's the first time, I'm sure I can figure it out, but it'll be so much easier to just have you there because then we learn and then we're good to go. And so through these, finding a way to talk to contractors, to talk to all the supers, but also to the trades and the sub-trades, right? You start developing a different approach to how you interact with people. And, so that moment that I'm thinking about was me coming back to site on the Monday, but on the Saturday, we had the kind of final whole building airtightness testing.
Right.
And literally, so it was a very big deal. We didn't have the luxury on that project to do mid-construction whole building airtightness testing, right? Because it was like broken in small parts, and you're done with the bottom part when the top part is still fully open.
Yeah.
So we had to take a risk management approach to that, but we didn't get a whole test to be sure we were okay. So a little bit stressful. And when on Monday morning, I barely stepped, on site, and it's literally my crane operator that says, Maureen, so how did we do?
Wow.
And I was like, oh, like, you actually care. Like, with all the conversations that we've had, even if they haven't been technical, for me to decide that my approach would be to share why I'm doing it.
Right.
It's not just about we're doing this. It's like, why are we doing this? And why do you play a role into this? Because I cannot do it alone. There's no way, right? Any one of us can do it alone. To see that my crane supervisor was the most excited person on site to be like, you have to tell me. I was like, this means a lot. And you can see that it's back to, men and women bringing different things, but all in all, we're making progress. We still have a long way to go, but I do believe that every team, no matter, design, construction, client teams, is always going to be better off with a bit of everything at the table. No matter, genders, but minorities and any type of, exactly.
Yeah.
So
coming back to Passive House and I guess all the things we've talked about, where do you see things? I mean, you've progressed a lot professionally. You've done some amazing projects. A lot of the talk today has been about what we need to get done in the next 20 years because we haven't done enough in the last 20. Breaking that down, I've been asking people today, where do you see things for you in the next 5 years?
I think at the core, it's mass scale implementation while still using the experience that we have and the technical knowledge that we have to release more typology to that market, right? We didn't know how to do commercial kitchens 5 years ago. I've sweated on them for
literally
5 years, literally, my brain melting in my hands. But that typology is now a lot more understood, and the impact that it has, because their EUIs are, right, their total energy consumption is so mind-blowing, off the roof. Like, I almost fell off my chair when I first looked at these figures. So we have worked through that typology, and we know how to make a really big impact. And so the next one we have on the table is we're working on different swimming pools. I know labs are coming as well. Like the Massachusetts market is, there's a lot around that with Boston. So I think that we're going to keep one portion of our expertise to keep exploring these archetypes to get to that recipe. It's okay. You don't need to become an expert, but we've looked. We've turned every stone. We've made sure we've looked at everything. And we've triggered it down, to that kind of recipe that if you follow all these best practices while modeling
will that be one recipe, or will it be lots of different recipes? I
think one recipe per typology. Right? Like, more or less that you might need to adapt to each building. But, for commercial kitchens, we now know what are the big culprits and how do you attack them, in which order of priority. So I think there's a small portion there. And I'm really excited about that because it's very rewarding. Again, that problem solving that I love. I love working with people, and I love that problem solving of, again, realizing that there's no way you can do it on your own without the kitchen consultant, the mechanical engineer, the architect, even the chefs, right? And in our cases, like universities, but like client group. And it's very rewarding. But I don't want to lose, I'm not saying I would lose track, but I also want to make sure that the vast majority of our time can be dedicated to mass scale implementation, because we are so running out of time and we have the tools, and I'm sure the right design teams are already out there. We're working with them. The right clients are starting to show up. And I just don't want to keep my eye of the end target.
Yep.
Right? Like for me, it's all about what is the biggest impact I can have into driving climate action and driving that market transformation. And I think that with the buildings that we have, like affordable housing, multi-unit residential, institutional, schools, like there is so much out there. Like in my presentation today, I had to kind of run the figures. We have already, I think, 2.75 trillion square feet here today. 2/3 of them are already will stay by 2050.
Yeah.
So that's about like 1.8 trillion square feet, and we're adding another 2 trillion square feet of new build. So there's so much that we have to tackle that it's out there, right? We're not missing work. So I'm going to stay very focused on mass scale implementation, how to deliver high performance at scale in the most affordable way, because that is how we impact people. That is how we drive change.
Nice. We look forward to tracking your progress. No doubt we'll be back to check in, see how it's going.
That sounds good.